This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, listen to up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, or give us something to discuss in our new post-credit scenes at the end of each episode, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture. Okay, so if by fright you mean got really drunk, then yes, I did have a fright night last night, Richard. Thank you for asking.
What was the occasion?
It was for the first time I went out for drinks with my workmates. I've never done that before, and I was like, "You're gonna see a new side of me," and I delivered. And am here today delivering the podcast to you, dear listener, woefully hungover. Terrible sleep.
You're just a
sleep.
Delivery boy, aren't you?
Yeah.
What kind of hangover do you have? I've never really known you to be one to get hangovers.
It doesn't usually happen.
You're getting older.
Yeah, exactly. The main thing that I remember happening was at some point I woke up and then laid over on my side, and all of a sudden the world was spinning and I had to hold my hand in front of my face and concentrate on a static object. I mean, everything was static, but I had to make the world static again.
Yeah.
So that was pretty scary. I thought I was going to die.
Oh yeah, nice. Been there. I've just in the last couple of years, no, I'm not even that long, a year, I've finally sort of started to learn when I'm inebriated, that I've now gained the ability to be you know what? This is my last drink. You know, I get to that point where it's if I have one more drink, I'm going to black out, and then just switch to water for the rest of the night, and then I wake up more or less fine the next morning.
Yeah. And if I sober up during the night, I'm usually fine the morning after. But I've had arrested development when it comes to getting drunk, though, Richard, because I didn't really get drunk till my 20s. So I'm a few years behind most people, I think. But do you know what else is a few years behind us? Is the release of the Fright Night series. Welcome along, everybody, to Film Franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast. This is a podcast where we watch and discuss film franchises, and this fortnight, myself, AJ, and my good buddy Richard, we are discussing the Fright Night series, which is a series of vampire horror comedy movies started in the 80s, with the most recent one being in 2014. They consist of the original film in 1985, Fright Night, its sequel, Fright Night Part 2 in 1988, a remake also called Fright Night in 2011, and then what was marketed as another sequel to that remake, but is actually just another remake in 2013 called Fright Night 2 New Blood. Was it 2013 or 2014? I thought it was 2014. Fright Night 2.
Right, I've got 2013.
2013, yeah, it is. All right, so this is one of those weird franchises we have where it feels like it only technically qualifies as a franchise, but it's more that it's a collection of movies about the same thing. If Fright Night Part 2, the original sequel, didn't exist, these would just be 3 remakes, and we wouldn't really count them for the series, for the podcast.
Well, I guess, although we probably wouldn't know until we watched them, that Fright Night 2 isn't, Anyway.
Yeah, so the first film is this cult classic horror comedy, and all the preceding films basically piggybacked off that. Despite having never seen them ourselves, the Fright Night films have plenty of cult popturian stuff to discuss. I'm very excited, including some dumb Imdb trivia.
Hey.
Quite a lot of it as well.
Hey.
And a tenuous connection to a grisly true crime story. So I'm ready to get into this with you, Richard. And let's start by talking about the original Fright Night in 1985, directed by Tom Holland.
Who would later go on to
be born and play Spider-Man.
Yeah, and then play Spider-Man.
One of the best things about this podcast is discovering all the obscure directors who share names with more famous people like Chris Miller, who directed Shrek 3. And is not the same Chris Miller from like the Lego Movie, and of course Richard Martin, the Airbud 2 director, and not you,
who isn't the more famous
yeah.
culture. Yeah.
What do you think that Fright Night 1 has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I reckon like a 70-ish.
It's quite high, actually. It's 92 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah. So what is this movie about? What is Fright Night 1985?
So Fright Night it's a very pure 80s horror, and it's cool to watch a film like this because it's not a slasher film, and we've covered these big horror franchises and like 80s horror, and it's normally always just slasher films, but this is a little bit different. And so it follows Charlie Brewster, who discovers that his new next door neighbor, Jerry Dandridge, is a vampire. And so he obviously, he struggles to get everyone to believe him. And then he enlists the help of Peter Vincent, who is like a Peter Cushing, Vincent Price type, who hosts a TV show called Fright Night, which is, and it's kind of one of those late night, here's a spooky story kind of thing.
The closest analog I could think of is Boobarella from The Simpsons, but I don't know what Boobarella is a parody of. But
Elvira,
there you go.
Mistress of the
It's
Dark.
an Elmira thing. Yeah.
Elmira from Pinky and the Brain. So it's that kind of thing where it's like he comes out of a coffin and he's I'll do it. Anyway, so then it culminates in this big showdown once everyone's convinced that he's a vampire, and they hunt him down.
Charlie's girlfriend Amy gets turned into a vampire and he has to turn her back. There's a very famous iconic poster for this film with a very spooky vampire face in the clouds above a house, and that face is what Charlie's girlfriend ends up looking like when she becomes a vampire. So check out the poster if you haven't seen it. It'll be on the thumbnail for this podcast. So what do you think? What do you think of Fright Night as a film?
I thought it was fucking sick. I really liked it. Like I said, there's a purity to it, and like just watching it, and I was like, and because Chris Sarandon, who plays was Jerry Dandridge, is so good. He looks like like a young Mark Ruffalo, but he's so charming and at the same time threatening, because there's a reoccurring theme in I guess like the first three, not so much in the last one, but about that like it's an important point that vampires can't enter a building unless they're invited, and then he gets invited, and there's like probably my favorite scene in the movie where Charlie comes home, sees the vampire in his house, and is like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you invited him." And he's like, "Yeah, now that I've been invited over, I'm probably going to be stopping by all the time, Charlie." Like it's very good. And then the third act is a lot of fun, and there's one of those things that I didn't realize I knew until I saw it. I was like, "Oh, I have seen this before," but when the final showdown is about to begin, Jerry's like, "Welcome to Fright Night." And it feels very iconic. But yeah, it's a very fun movie. Yeah, and I very much enjoyed my time watching it.
I thought that third act was what elevated the film a lot for me. There's some very cool filmmakery prosthetic effects, like it's a bunch of puppets filled with fake blood that gets splattered everywhere. The kind of stuff we saw a lot of in the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels, which was really cool. And that I think is where this movie sticks the landing in horror movie canon, is that it's pretty good prosthetic gore, which is always very fun.
It's very kind of similar to the first to American Werewolf in London. It's like that has such an iconic transformation scene, and there's some very similar techniques used in this because they do encounter a werewolf.
Well, sort of. Yeah, we'll get to that.
And that has a transformation scene which is very reminiscent of American Werewolf.
So controversial. I don't know if this is a controversial opinion. I thought the second act of this film. I wouldn't go as far to say it sucked, but it was losing me in the second act, where I was just kind of like, oh, this is just another '80s horror movie that doesn't translate, space and time. It hasn't dated
doesn't
well.
hold up. Yeah.
All right, I thought you were saying hold up as in you've got to do something. So there's a part where Peter Vincent, who's the TV show host, agrees to help prove that Jerry is a vampire. And the methods they try to do this is they just go to Jerry's house, and Charlie knows Jerry is a vampire, and Jerry knows Charlie knows he's a vampire, right? So it's all about trying to convince Peter Vincent that he's not a vampire. And the methods they try are crucifixes and holy water, which have no effect on him. We later find out that's because he's too powerful for those things to affect him anymore. But Peter does indeed discover Jerry is a vampire by accident when looking in like a pocket mirror and seeing Jerry has no reflection. And it's like, obviously do that one first. Like, you don't need to get this guy to drink holy water. You don't even have to talk to him. You just sneak up to his house and shine a mirror in there. Like, it just felt like such a, I don't know. It's the kind of like, I'm not necessarily like a nitpicky plot hole kind of person, but this is the kind of thing where it's like, this is so obviously the first thing you do, but it's not the most
I think
dramatic.
it was more about like, because they were trying to kill him as well.
Yeah.
So they want to go in guns blazing, so to speak. It's interesting because they didn't like stick out to me at all as odd, and I thought it was quite a cool moment where Peter sees the reflection. Because you messaged me, I was very late in watching these films. I've been quite busy. I watched the remake and its quote unquote sequel this morning.
Yeah.
But you messaged me earlier in the week to say like Fright Night has a real cool third act, but the second act is real slow, so don't get discouraged.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was like, oh, well, I wonder when the movie's going to slow down, and I paused it to see how far through the movie I was, and I was like an hour and 10 minutes into it. And so I was like, I guess the second act is over, because I was like, this really feels like the start of the third act.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, I was like, okay, well, when's the second act going to slow down? And I was like, oh, I'm through it. It does, yeah.
Maybe
this movie didn't drag
me
me at any
maybe
point.
It's just me.
I guess you're just more nitpicky with plot holes.
Oh my god!
One of the famous CinemaSins subscriber.
One of the main characters in this film is like, he's not really Charlie's best friend. He's kind of like incorrectly labeled that in like the lore of the series, but he's more just this guy he knows named Ed, who they call Evil, or Evil Ed. Like, his nickname is Evil. And the characterization of Evil Ed in the first film was such a baffling creative decision to me, because I found him so irredeemably annoying. Like, he's like, hey, Brewster, like, he talks like that the whole way through. I just found him so horribly unlikable until he gets bit and becomes one of the vampire villains, and I was like, oh, I get it. Like, this character was always supposed to be a vampire, and they don't, like, you know what I mean? Like, he, as a vampire, it's like he's creepy because he's so annoying and childish and scary. But before that, he just seems like a like a really annoying kid I would go to high school with.
Yeah, I mean, it was the 80s, dude.
Yeah, everyone was annoying. Everyone was annoying in the 80s. But there's some great stuff when he does become a vampire. I put on Instagram the main picture for this movie was when he tries to attack Peter Vincent after he first turns into a vampire, and Peter Vincent presses a cross into his forehead, and it like burns a hole in it. It looks very cool. So a lot of cool stuff there again with the prosthetic effects. But this character, I'm surprised, Richard. I'm surprised you like this film more than me, because when that character was rising to prominence, I was like, Richard's gonna fucking hate this character.
I don't think I so.
Yeah, interesting.
I guess you just don't really know me that well.
Well, maybe you don't know me. Let's introduce you. You know when like couples start again and they're like, hi, I'm AJ, and they shake hands, and it's like a big turning point for them.
Is that something that you think that all couples do?
Eventually. eventually. You mentioned before that they encounter a werewolf, and that is not entirely true. So there's
is it a shapeshifter like in Twilight?
Yeah, they're not children of the moon. No, so in the third act of the film, Peter Vincent is once again fighting Evil Ed, and Evil Ed turns into a wolf. And when I was watching the movie, I was like, what? Why is he turning into a wolf? And I looked it up and I was like, why? And actually a coworker who really loves these movies talked to me about it. And apparently Fright Night is a bit more of a deep cut than your typical vampire story, because traditional vampire lore actually states that they can turn into not only bats, but also rats, mist, and wolves.
Nice.
Which I think is a really interesting piece of lore, because it clearly indicates that despite being so linked in pop culture now, werewolves and vampires weren't conceived as the Jack and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank of of like, mythical horror monsters. Because if you're designing, a dichotomy of two monsters and one's a vampire and one's a werewolf, you then wouldn't give one of them 100% of the powers of the other monster, right? It's very much moving in on the werewolf's brand. So I thought that was interesting. I never knew that, which is surprising that no other vampire media I've seen has delved into this deeper lore, because they do turn into mist and rats as well at different points in the story. I guess a wolf is a more striking thing to see. Into.
Because we're so familiar with werewolves. Children of the Moon, sorry.
Children of the Moon. Thank you, Stephanie Meyer. So the screenplay was written by Tom Holland, who apparently was, quote, laughing the entire time, literally on the floor, kicking my feet in the air in hysterics, is the quote. And it's like,
very cute.
I don't know if it's that funny.
Yeah.
Is it so fun? Like, I'm not even critiquing the movie. It just happens to be maybe more of like a quirky horror than a comedy, But it's like, it was so funny. I was kicking my feet in the air in hysterics while writing it. I couldn't write it. My hands fell off the typewriter. So there's a lot of quotes like this. Like, I picked this one specifically because I thought it was funny, but like, there are a lot of quotes from the people involved and a lot of the fans and the cult following around it that indicate that this series, and especially this first film, was very special to a lot of people, which isn't necessarily surprising in its own right, but like the fact that I didn't even know Fright Night was about vampires going in, it's weird to find this pocket of pop culture with all this passion brimming beneath the surface, that you never knew about. Even though I haven't seen, I don't know, Avatar: The Last Airbender, I still see all the hype for it, and you walk your life as a movie buff thinking you know every corner, even if you haven't seen it, and then turns out everyone loves Fright Night.
Yeah, including me.
We're in. Can I piggyback?
Well, I like it more than you.
Yeah, can I piggyback off your love to get into the club?
Yeah.
We're like lining up and they're like, how much do you love Fright Night? And I'm like, how much do I love Fright? Ask Richard, man.
No, I'll just get my ID and then I'll get in and then I'll hand it to you out the back and then you can use it to get in.
Because we look the same.
Very
good. So you mentioned that Peter Vincent was inspired by Peter Cushing and Vincent Price. The role was offered to Vincent Price, who turned it down because he was over being typecast in horror movies, and by 1985 was,
quite old.
But do you want to know a fun behind-the-scenes fact that'll make your eyes water?
No.
Oh, okay.
Moving on. Yes.
So apparently the most excruciating part of the makeup process for the cast were the contact lenses. In those days, the lenses were hard plastic, hand-painted with glitter. They were lacquered and sanded. The cast could only wear them for a maximum of 20 minutes because they were virtually blind in them, and they were thick, painful, and dried out their eyes. That is the worst, makeup struggle I've ever heard from any film. That sounds horrible. Imagine having to act and being like, I'm going blind. This is permanently ruining my vision.
That's horrific. There is a story of someone that, like, an actor that, you know, was doing the whole method thing and very nearly permanently blinded themselves because they kept contacts in all day that they were like, you know, only keep these in for like 20 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, that's freaky. Hard contact lenses. Ooh, no, thank you.
No.
With glitter? Like, God.
Yeah. Well, presumably the glitter would have been like varnished in, right? So the outer layer.
Yeah, you'd think so. Not just.
You'd hope so.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, because they would still have glitter in their eyes to this day.
Do you have any more thoughts on Fright Night 1 before we move on to the next ones? We will be, you know, hopping back and forth to talk about certain things.
I'm ready to move on.
I'm ready to move on to Fright Night Part 2 in 1988. This was directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, who has directed one other significant film for this podcast that we watched on Film Franchise Fortnights. Can you guess what that film is?
Can I have a clue?
It's another iconic horror film, and it's a very notable one. But it is a sequel. But it is not just your average run-of-the-mill horror movie sequel.
Is it one of the Jaws movies?
No.
Cool.
He also directed Halloween 3: Season of the Witch.
Very cool.
So there you go. Tom Holland did not return as he had scored a new gig directing Child's Play, which we haven't covered on the podcast, but remains kind of like the one out on the horizon.
It's our white whale.
Yeah. Stephen Jeffries, who played Evil Ed, he didn't return despite there being a cliffhanger at the end of the first film implying that he survived and was still alive, because he was starring in a movie. He was actually scored the lead role in another horror movie at the same time called 976 Evil. Who do you think directed that movie? This is a fun game. You've got the entire world of IMDb at your disposal. And
Tom Holland.
No, Robert Englund directed it.
Oh, nice.
Freddy Krueger himself. It is apparently not very good.
Does it have a sequel?
I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe we should check it out. What do you think Fright Night Part 2 has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I imagine, this one will be closer to your just barely fresh kind of 69.
Nah, man. It's only got 33% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Really interesting.
Which is pretty low, I thought.
Yeah.
What is this movie about? There might be a reason for why it's such a low score. It doesn't have very many reviews, so we'll get to that in a second.
976 Evil does have a sequel.
Oh.
976 Evil 2, The Astral Factor.
Oh.
So I guess, if you guys want us to cover that, head along to our Patreon. So, Fright Night 2. It's a couple of years later, and Charlie has been in intense therapy.
He's a college student now. Yeah,
he's a college student, and he's essentially the therapy that he was going through was to clear him mentally and make him believe that Jerry was just a serial killer that he stopped and not actually a vampire. But then, there's another vampire in town. And then this movie, I found the hardest to follow out of them. So there were moments where it would lose me for a bit.
Right. So the new vampire in town is named Regine, and she is Jerry's sister. And so she is seeking revenge on Charlie for killing Jerry, and the way she plans to do this is by turning him into an immortal vampire and then torturing him for eternity. So that's sort of the main crux of the plot. Peter Vincent's back, but this time he's got a new girlfriend, as in Charlie has a new girlfriend. I thought this was a pretty competent sequel.
Yeah, I think it's kind of just a worthy successor, but not quite as good.
Yeah.
But again, it's one of those the purity and the simplicity of the first one elevates it, whereas everything on paper and on film is just as good as the first one.
I think I preferred the prosthetic stuff in this one, the blood and gore. There's
crazy.
a whole section, a whole team of vampires in this one, and one of them is this big dude who's actually, I'm pretty sure he's in the X-Files, which is how I recognized him. And he eats bugs all through, like he'll find a bug and eat it, and then at the end he gets sliced open and like actual maggots like fall out of his belly, and they were real maggots, and I thought that was a very cool, fun, gross prosthetic effect kind of thing. So one big criticism I have for both the first two films, though, and it kills me to say this because it seems so counter to what I usually enjoy. I think the inclusion of the actual fictional TV show Fright Night really weakens the believability of the story. Especially the second one. Like, I usually love when movies are about movies or show business, right? I'm like, cool, what's the, show me how it works, show me what's going on. But this just demonstrates that there's like a clear lack of understanding of how TV show productions work. Like, Peter Vincent has the show back and then he loses it to Regine, the vampire. And it's just like he gets told that he's fired when he shows up to work, and it's not very like... There are processes for this, and like this woman can't just come and take over the show. I'm pretty sure Fright Night is like Peter Vincent's intellectual property as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. Matthew Lillard found out he wasn't going to be in Scoob via a tweet announcing that what's his face.
That's true. Him. Maybe this is the same thing in a pre-Twitter. Time.
I don't know. It's a very low budget, not very well respected kind of show. I would believe it.
Okay. I guess so. Oh, one other thing that's in this film is that the vampires are repelled by roses, which is another one of those deep cut lore things. It's like, it's not only garlic, it's also roses.
Because they both smell real good.
That's true, but for very different reasons. Like you and me.
Which one am I?
Well, we don't have a one-to-one analog, but we both smell good for very different reasons.
What are the reasons?
I'll leave that up to Fannin. It's up to our listeners to decide why. Let us know. Let us know in the comments or on the Discord what we smell like and why each of us smells that way.
And why they're both good.
So we do this podcast over Google Hangouts, and the way I've sized the screen of you right now, you are so low in the camera that the big circle red hang up button is covering your nose, and you look like a clown, and it's very funny.
Nice.
I'm gonna take a photo and show you it later, if that's okay with you. You're like, I don't want to look stupid. Don't. This is great. This is good content. Yes. Look at this. Anyway, okay, enough tomfoolery, Richard. When planning for a third film, which we'll get more into detail on later, Roddy McDowall, who played Peter Vincent, he loved that character. He loved playing him so much.
I like that.
And was so eager to bring the original creator and director Tom Holland back to the franchise. So he set up a meeting with Holland and Carlico Pictures chairman Jose Menendez. However, before the meeting could occur, Menendez and his wife were murdered by their sons, Lyle and Eric, the Menendez brothers, who are quite a big, quite a famous true crime case. Not only did this stop another sequel, but it also interfered with the release of Fright Night 2, which attained an extremely limited theatrical distribution before being dumped on home video by one of the subsidiaries. That's my theory for why the critic score is so low. Is it's only got like 9 reviews or something like that, and it's
right. Interesting. So it's probably not a very widely seen film.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Lyle and Eric, and if you have sort of a passing interest in true crime, the story of the Menendez brothers has come up a bit recently because someone found a basketball trading card for a certain basketballer, and in the background, in the crowd, you can see the Menendez brothers watching the game, like the night after, like they'd just killed their parents and then they went to the game, so you can see them in the back of this photo. But yeah, there you go. So a tenuous tie to a true crime story that also potentially affected the legacy of the series.
Damn.
Do you have?
I don't like the Menendez brothers anymore.
What do you? What do you?
I only just heard of them now. Anyway, yeah. Sorry.
Do you have any more thoughts on Fright Night 2? I feel like Fright Night Part 2, I should say. I feel like the climax is real good. I don't know, I just felt like this is a real good movie. And
it's cool. It's like, if you like the first one, I can't imagine why you wouldn't like this one.
Yeah, except for those 9 critics who clearly, well, actually, 6 of them didn't. 9 of them did.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, how many years later is 2011 from 1988? Go.
23.
23 years later, we got Fright Night in 2011, directed by Craig Gillespie, who I don't think we recognise. I looked him up to see if there were any fun little idiosyncrasies, and there weren't. What do you think?
He's done some interesting movies, though.
None we've covered on the podcast, though, I mean.
Huh?
None that we've covered on the podcast, I mean.
Yeah, but he did, like, I, Tonya. He did Lars and the Real Girl.
Yeah. What do you think Fright Night 2011 has on Rotten Tomatoes?
70.
It's got 72. Very close. What do you think? What do you think this movie is about?
So it's a remake of the first one. Major changes. So in this one, Jerry Dandridge is played by Colin Farrell. The main character is played by Anton Yelchin. His mum is Toni Collette. His girlfriend is Imogen Poots.
The Poots.
Yeah, Imogen Gay Poots. That's her full name.
Gay Poots. Imagine surviving high school with that name.
And the Peter Vincent character is now a Chris Angel mind freak type, played by David Tennant. Like, every single character in this film is like a recognizable actor. It's insane. And like Dave Franco, and Christopher Mintz plus.
What'd you think?
This movie fucking rocks.
This movie fucking rocked, dude. I thought this was great.
This is one of those movies. I remember when this came out. I remember the giant poster at my local movie theater and just thinking that looks fucking terrible. Like, I was like, I knew it was a remake of a horror film, and so I was like, God. And like, the poster is trash. The poster is fucking trash. And it was just like, there's no way this is going to be good. And I went up until this week just assuming this movie was bad. Yeah. You know? Like, if anyone had asked me, oh, what's Fright Night 2011 like? I'd be like, I haven't seen it, but I can tell you it's fucking awful. But oh my God, it fucking rocks. It's awesome. Rocks, it's probably the best horror remake we've covered on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely is. What I think sets it apart from most horror remakes, and indeed most horror films in general, especially of this era of the 2010 mid 2000s to mid 2010s horror movie, one of the famous dead zones for horror as a genre. I thought that the characters were great.
Yeah.
And so many horror movies, the characters are just whatever.
Forgettable.
You know?
Yeah. Because it follows all the same plot beats.
Yeah.
And like Amy gets bitten, and I was genuinely like, oh man.
Yeah.
But then obviously like they'll find a way to turn it back. But it's a very like cool way, because it does bring over everything you liked from the original. But it's like, it almost feels like a dream of the original. Like what's his face who wrote Annihilation, the film, read the book once years.
Alex Garland.
Alex Garland. He read the book like years earlier and didn't reread it. And he just kind of like wrote the movie based on what he remembered from the book. And it's kind of like that in a way. It's like, oh, there's a scene at a club, but it's like in a different place in the film, and there's like all these different things. And like you said, the characters, like everyone in this film is like an amazing actor.
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
I thought Anton Yelchin, who I've only sadly just started to become familiar with because of this podcast.
Yeah, no, he's fantastic.
He's such a likable lead as Charlie Brewster. Colin Farrell as Jerry the Vampire. He's so fucking good. He's so scary, but he's also kind of like deliciously cheesy. It's like,
and he's sexy.
Yeah, he's sexy, and it's one of those roles where it's like, if Colin Farrell Colin Farrell strikes me as someone who's probably played a lot of roles that were kind of a struggle to get through because he's been in a few stinkers. I feel like this is one of those healing roles where it's like you get to play Jerry Dandridge and it's this super fun, super chewing the scenery kind of thing.
Yeah.
I thought that I really liked Imogen Poots, who plays Amy, Charlie's girlfriend, and Toni Collette, who plays Charlie's mum. Their particular dynamic that they had with each other is the kind of relationship you just never see on screen. And I really love that.
Neither of them are really damsels in distress.
No, not at all.
They feel like they have their own agency.
Yeah.
And they don't need to be saved. Like Anton Yelchin does save them, but like there's a very like can fight for themselves kind of thing.
And and I just loved that they had a good mother girlfriend relationship. I don't know. I don't remember the last time I saw a movie where there was like a pleasant relationship between those two types of characters.
Yeah.
David Tennant is a very different Peter Vincent, as you said. He's more of a Chris Angel, fake TV magician, and he is great in this. He was one of the standouts in the reviews. People were like, Colin Farrell and David Tennant are the
just chewing the scenery,
yeah,
like
absolutely, yeah. Christopher Mintz-Plasse, I thought, was a much more palatable Evil Ed, who was actually used pretty sparingly in the movie. Same as Dave Franco, who maybe wasn't famous when this movie came out.
I mean, this is pre like 21 Jump Street.
Yeah, I feel like you would use Dave Franco more if he was famous by this point because he's very
21 Jump Street was his breakout role.
I didn't like the other version of Evil Ed, but it felt like the movie wanted me to like him. Christopher Mintz-Plasse's Evil Ed is like, this guy's a gross, nerdy incel kind of character. Like, you know, the way he talks about like Charlie's girlfriend, it's like when she's not there, he's like, oh, you know, I know she's hot, bro, but you leave behind your friendship for her, and it's like, I feel like you almost feel like the story wants you to be like, it's a story of how Charlie realizes he shouldn't have ditched his friend until it was too late. But no, the movie is not framing it that way at all. It's like, Charlie doesn't hang out with this dude anymore because he's a skeevy little creep. And like, it allows you to just immediately not like Ed, and which I feel enhances the movie. So I thought that was really cool.
But yeah, like the humor is really good as well in the film.
Yep.
And oh god, it's so much fun.
I really liked that Charlie and Amy in the first film, it begins with him trying to like pressure her to put out, which is a very 1985 acceptable couple dynamic, I guess, to show on screen. But it does have like shades of like, these days. Not the worst thing in the world, but because he's still relatively respectful about it, I guess. But I really like that in the remake, Charlie and Amy consummating their relationship was understated and depicted as mutual nervousness between the two. You know, like it's like they both want to do it, but they're both nervous, and it's mentioned in the film like 3 or 4 times. It's not really that big of a deal. And I just thought that, again, it's like the whole seeing a relationship between a girlfriend and a mum. It's like, I don't see this enough in horror movies, like a nervous couple who haven't had sex yet. You know, I don't know, it's cool. Overall, I would just say that I really loved the characters, and I would love to revisit them, which sadly we can't now, which is...
Yeah.
It's weird. Like, when Anton Yelchin died, it was like, oh, the guy from Star Trek. And now after Terminator and Fright Night, I'm like, oh man. Like we did.
Yeah, I'd watched a film called Like Crazy that he's in.
Right.
Which is a very good film. It's very hard to watch, like in terms of it's a very realistic kind of portrayal of a romance and the issues that come with that, and that's also got Felicity Jones in it.
All right.
But yeah, that kind of made me appreciate him as an actor, and then I was quite sad when he passed away,
right?
Because he's so young, and he's one of those. He was great in everything he was in, and he just Yeah, he had his whole career ahead of him.
Yeah,
he was in movie 40. He's like one of the only people who managed to escape movie 43 as well. He was in a sketch where he played a necrophiliac who worked at a morgue. And it's very briefly seen in a trailer, but it's not in the film.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. I think it might be on the DVD or whatever. But.
Right. I think that when we recently, well, a few weeks back now, it was a few months maybe even, we did a podcast on dead actors who would have been perfect for roles made after they died. And we had someone write in saying Anton Yelchin would have been great for Paul Atreides in the new Dune. And now I feel comfortable in being like, yeah, absolutely. Like,
this role you know nothing about.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It seems like, I mean, if Timothy Chalamet,
if Timothy Chalamet can play it, the Anton Yelchin could have. Yeah,
exactly. So narratively, I think Fright Night 2011 is easily the stronger of the two Fright Nights. The only area I'd say it's clearly inferior is there are no juicy prosthetic effects, which the original.
Yeah, there's a few 2011isms in it.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
The fact it was clearly released in 3D.
Yeah.
There's a few like things getting thrown at camera. Casting Christopher Mintz-Plasse.
Yeah.
Like there's a few things like that. And
CGI like, monsters that don't look scary because they're CGI. That sort of thing, which is like, yeah, that does suck, and I can absolutely understand if you like grew up in the 80s and were raised on horror, why this would be no match for the first one for those reasons. But I think this, if anything, this just speaks to how strong the story is. That, like, even despite all this, I'm like, this is my favorite Fright Night. You know?
Yeah. If also just a random placement, but if you are interested in Anton Yelchin led horror films, you should watch Green Room.
Oh yes.
Yeah, very very cool movie.
The Poots is in that as well.
Yeah, Imogen Poots. And it's Patrick Stewart plays the head of a like neo-Nazi gang. It's very very like realistic kind of horror, but cool. It's very good movie. It's very good in it.
So apparently Steven Spielberg provided a great deal of input for this film, which is interesting. I looked up, like, it's like he helped with these two scenes. I can't remember what scenes they were. It wasn't very interesting, but the fact Spielberg's got his name on it, I thought was like, oh yeah, that might be why it's a cut above your average horror movie remake.
And it's interesting. It starts with the DreamWorks logo.
Does it?
Yeah, like the ripple in the pond, and then pan up to the little boy in the moon. So during the last thing I've got to say on Friday Night 2011 is during a screening for the original film at Monsterpalooza in 2012, the cast of the original film, we're talking about the remake, and I've got some quotes of what the original cast thought of the remake. I think Amanda Bearsy, who played Amy, said, as a standalone horror movie, it was very well done. It didn't lessen the appeal of the original. It was just more of a one-note film. The guy who played Evil Ed, so was Steve Jeffries, he said he only watched the first 20 minutes and then turned it off. The Stark and Ragsdale, I'm not sure who they are, I think Ragsdale played Charlie, were the only two people in attendance at their theatre, and Ragsdale said he liked an early draft of the screenplay, but he wasn't particularly enamored with the final result, and thought there was kind of a nastiness to the Evil Ed character. Which is like, I would say, yeah, because I don't want to like Evil Ed. His name's fucking Evil Ed. Like, don't listen to them. This movie, like, there's no way this movie should be as good as it is.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that this has 72% on Rotten Tomatoes is insane. Like, a Fright Night remake with that fucking poster shouldn't be good, like, at all.
One last quote here. When asked his thoughts in 2015, Tom Holland talked about the remake, and he said, kudos to them on every level for their professionalism, but they forgot the humour and the heart. They should have called it something other than Fright Night, because it had no more than a passing resemblance to the original. What they did to Jerry Dandridge and Peter Vincent was criminal. Smiling, he added, outside of that, it was wonderful. And it's like, yeah, you're just too close to it, Tom Holland. Like,
yeah, like hard out. It's like, it's not even like they improved on the original. It's just like, it's just a very good time of a film.
Yeah.
Also, it's worth mentioning that there's a like a chase scene in the film where Jerry is driving after Charlie, his mum and his girlfriend, and then they kind of stop in the middle of the road and have a little bit of face off, and this random car drives up, and is like, and this guy gets out, is like, "Hey, what's going on, everyone?" And that's Chris Sarandon, who played Jerry in the original.
So there's a lot of back and forth. It's real interesting to pick a side on this and then read what the other side is saying and being like, whatever, man. Like, the idea of saying what they did to Jerry Dandridge and Peter Vincent was criminal, and it's like, they are literally the two best parts of the movie. It's like, would you prefer David Tennant just played Peter Vincent the exact same way? Like, surely that's not what you would want.
Yeah, it's a very 2011 update. But I mean, Jerry is fantastic in this movie. Colin Farrell is amazing.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have any more thoughts on Fright Night 2011?
No, just go watch it.
Go watch it. And while you do that, allow us to partake in a couple of randomly placed useless statistics. I've only got 2, but feel free to think of any more if you can. So I've got a boring one and then a very funny, silly one. So I'll go the boring. Well, it's not boring. We'll probably find it entertaining. I don't know how many other people will. The Fright Night remake is the 24th film from 2011 that we have watched for film franchise Fortnights, which is actually the most popular year for franchises we've covered.
Wow.
So we've watched more films from 2011 for film franchise Fortnights than any other year. Other 2011 films we've watched include The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Hellraiser Revelations, Happy Feet 2, Spooky Buddies, Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure, and A Cinderella Story Once Upon a Song. Those are some of the other.
It's just a wee selection.
Yeah. We recently paid to upgrade our Letterboxd account, which gives us all these wonderful stats, and so I dipped into there to see what was going on with any stats we could relate to this. And my other useless statistic is Fright Night is the second franchise we've watched this year, very recently as well, to have a film which stars Anton Yelchin replacing another actor in a relatively iconic role. In Terminator Salvation, he plays Kyle Reese. And also, it also stars stars a character with the surname Brewster, because Catherine Brewster is in Terminator 3, and has multiple movies in the series which ignore previous continuity, but in some way ignore the fact that they're reboots at the same time. Because
I'm going to be honest with you, I think the 2011 fact was way more fun.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
What does that say about us? What about us?
What about Bob?
But do you know what I mean, though? Is that, like, the Terminator sequels get to the point where it's like they don't want you to think of them as reboots, even though they basically are, especially like Genesis. And the same with Fright Night 2, The New Blood in 2013, which is marketed as Fright Night 2 despite not being a sequel. And also, there's another statistic, our second franchise to have New Blood as a subtitle after Friday the 13th.
Very
Part
good,
7.
Yep.
Cool. So, Friday Night 2, New Blood, 2013, directed by Eduardo Rodriguez. It has no critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, baby.
Yay.
Yes! This is where we are. This is what we're dealing with. This was a straight-to-DVD release, so it does have a 17% audience score. What is this movie about?
This is like a Mad Libs version of the original film, where it's like Charlie and his friends in Romania, find out they're living next door to a vampire named a sexy female vampire named Jerry Dandridge.
So that's it's on a Romanian school field trip. Well,
and they've
got an American field trip to Romania, and Jerry is now Jerry with a G and an I.
And she's their sexy professor, who's also a sexy bisexual vampire.
A bisexy vampire.
Yeah.
Sexy in two ways, much in the way that you and I smell two different ways.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a lot more straight to video. There's
This is what I expected Fright Night 2011 to be.
Yeah. There's very long extended shots of naked breasts.
Mm-hmm.
There's like poor lighting. There's continuity errors. There's just all around bad filmmaking. Anytime the film comes to like a climax, they go, "I know what'll fucking make this," and they just put like a strobe lighting effect over it, and it's so fucking hard and frustrating to watch.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have epilepsy or anything, but oh my god, I could not stand watching those scenes. So it's infuriating.
So what do you think of the film?
It's not very good.
It sucks, man. This is as bad as Fright Night 2011 is good.
Yeah, like it actually, I really wanted to like this film.
Mm.
I was like, man, imagine if Fright Night is one of the best franchises we've covered. Like, but my god, yeah, this film is just like, and then so the climax of the film is, because okay, so it's Fright Night 2 as well, so it's supposedly just following on from the next from the last film. We've got different actors playing Charlie and Amy, and he's like, "Oh, I think the professor's a vampire," and Amy's like, "A vampire? Oh my god, like you sound delusional." And it's like, you just fought one. You were a vampire for a little bit. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, yeah, and also,
and so it's clearly not like supposed to directly follow on.
Yeah.
But it's just funny, like that reading of the film that it's supposed to be a direct sequel. That it's like, what are you talking about? And also, Peter Vincent in this film is like, what's the kind of show that like
Ghost
those
Hunter.
like Ghost Hunter kind of thing where, you know, the shows where they wander around a castle at night with like a night vision camera on. And I'll be honest, this might be the most realistic portrayal of what a Peter Vincent type would be.
Yeah.
And so like that's the one thing I'll say in the film's favor is that like I actually thought it was a clever, because the Chris Angel Peter Vincent, it was a little bit like, obviously this is what you're going to do. Every reinterpretation of a magician was Chris Angel in 2011, but this one of like, it's some low budget, no one respects, like that's what your vampire expert would be, you know?
Yeah, he was inspired by Bear Grylls this time.
I was going to say he looks like Bear Grylls as well. Yeah.
So, and I think that is maybe the coolest thing about Fright Night as a franchise, is seeing the different interpretations of the Peter Vincent character.
Yeah.
And certainly the best part of this film. But yeah, what a load of shit. The directing I thought was bad. Sorry, Eduardo Rodriguez.
There's one bit that like infuriated me. So Charlie looks out of his window and sees his sexy new professor getting it on with some sexy lady, and then the woman she's making out with starts to bleed, and he's like, what's going on? And it's like they're looking directly out the window across at each other as if they're like at eye level to each other, and then he calls his friend in, and the window is all of a sudden like 2 stories up from them and way to the right, and it's like, this is just bad filmmaking. Like, what are you doing? How do you not realize that those shots look nothing alike?
Yeah,
like I didn't even realize it was supposed to be the same window.
Yeah, I agree. I thought the actress who played Amy was directed really inconsistently as well. So the story starts and they are recently broken up. You know, they vaguely say something about Charlie cheated on her, but then don't expand on it anywhere enough. But like when they first talk in the film, it's like it's between 4 or 5 lines. It's like the direction she was given switches between she doesn't know Charlie that well, she has a wee crush on him, and only a fraction of the time does it feel like she's his ex-girlfriend. Like he's like, Amy, and she's like, oh hey, Charlie, and it's like, oh, they've just met, or like this is the girl he has a crush on in his class, and it's like, Charlie, I can't do this anymore, and it's like, wait, what? Where are we? What is this relationship? Evil Ed is back and alive and well again, and he's played by oh god, what's his name?
There's no way this actor is anyone noteworthy.
Chris Waller. The guy's name is, and he is somewhere in between the insufferable original version of Evil Ed and Christopher Mintz-Plasse' Evil Ed.
He's fucking insufferable. He's the worst Evil Ed.
It makes him worse because he's not a cartoon character like the original one.
Yeah,
and the film also wants you to like him, and he's, you know, like one of the knockoff Stiflers from the American Pie film.
That's 100% it.
You said before that, like, you're talking like, I know, you said that that whenever this film reaches like a climax, it's like, I know what'll make this better, and it goes all stroby.
Yeah.
The actual climax of the film is so poorly handled. So through a very convoluted set of vampire rules that were made for the film that I'm not going to bother try and explain, it ends in this like pool of blood.
Yeah.
And Charlie is hiding out, and just when you think all is lost, he jumps with a wooden stake towards Jerry, and it's good momentum. I think he's just pulled it out of his heart, I think, because he becomes a vampire, and he pulls it out and shows that it's missed his heart, and you're like, you know, in the perfect world, if I was invested in this movie, I would have been like, fuck yeah, like, this is the final showdown. So he pulls it out of his chest, and he jumps, and he goes to stake the girl, the Jerry, and she blocks him, and it's like, no, end this now. That would have been
like
good.
They spend so long on this pool of blood, and like people get out and then they get pulled back in and they get pulled underwater, and it's like, it's so hard to follow because you're like, didn't this just fucking happen?
And then Peter Vincent rocks up and he shoots the vampire. And it's like, good momentum. It's like, okay, end this now. And then he misses. And it's like, oh my God, let me out of this never-ending nightmare. It's so frustrating. It reminded me of another straight-to-DVD bad sequel we've watched for this podcast. Maybe one of the worst was Legally Blondes, the straight-to-DVD third Legally Blonde film, which ends in a court case. I can't remember what the subject was, but the arguments were so convoluted that it was like, what the fuck is going on? And so much needs to be explained, and so much needs to happen before you get to the point where you're like, and that's how we arrived at our conclusion. And almost, and like, that's like, that was all in dialogue. This is all, as you say, in like blocking and action, and it's like, it's so convoluted. And we've talked before about like good movies are simple, bad movies are convoluted. And like, this is what it is that climax is just goes on forever. I don't understand the rules of the universe. I don't understand why it's like, if Charlie dies before a vampire Amy can bite him, then Jerry will be unable to go out in the light. It's like,
oh, God.
oh my God, I don't care, and leave me alone.
But like the films just feel so exploitative as well. Like, there's this whole scene of very sexual overtones of Jerry teasing and torturing this woman, and so she like strips her naked and seems to be kind of getting her off, and then she slits her throat, and then she strips her completely naked, hangs her upside down so that her neck bleeds and fills this bathtub so Jerry can be like rejuvenated. And the film just like, so the whole scene, that's like, it's 5-minute long scene, it keeps cutting to the shot of Charlie, and it's kind of a cool shot. It's like him like hiding in like a coffin or something like that, and he's just illuminated by like one beam of orange light, which illuminates one of his eyes. But oh my God, the film just like keeps cutting back to like this woman's breasts and exposed genitals,
covered in blood.
And it's like,
so it's like supposed to be a grisly, sad scene, but it's filmed to be sexualized, and it's always
and like there's one bit where it cuts from like a wide shot so you can see her entire body to like just the same thing but slightly lower, and it's like dun 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 dun, and it's like, this is very bad editing and directing. And it like, this is one of the only films that I've like noticed bad editing and bad continuity, and you know that it's worth pointing out.
Hey, speaking of bad continuity, and I didn't see this on the IMDb Goofs section, I noticed this just myself. When Amy is a vampire in the blood pool, you can see her reflection in the blood.
Nice.
Do you know how easy a reflection is to mask out? Like that, if you are a VFX artist worth your salt, you can get rid of a reflection. It's so I was like, man, that's because it was so in my face that I was like, they're going to reference this. It's going to be like, but wait,
Yeah.
I can see your reflection. But they don't.
That's really cool, yeah.
There's also a really gaudy animated comic section which tells the backstory
God,
of the
yes.
vampire that Evil Ed tells, and it's clearly wanting to be the Deathly Hallows, like that famous animated scene from the Deathly Hallows.
It's also done like a very weird thing that I've never seen in an actual film, but it's like they use this weird morph kind of thing between each shot. So it'll be her like looking forward, and then it'll cut to her looking outside or whatever. Her head's turned, and instead of just like cutting from one still frame to the other or animating in between, it does this like it's like a preset in After Effects you can drop on it. That's just morph between the two.
Warp stabilizer.
Yeah. And it looks so strange. It's like, yeah, it's not something I've ever seen in like an actual film.
Well, hey, that idea is what got Eduardo Rodriguez the job. He pitched that, and they were like, "Yep, that's." The IMDb words it like this is like, and that's how we impress producers. But I imagine with a straight to DVD movie, it was more like Eduardo was the only person to come in and was like, "I've got this idea," and they're like, "Well, he seems to be real passionate about it. Like, might as well just give it to him." I feel like Fright Night is the least well-known story I've ever seen replicated this many times. You know, like I'm used to seeing multiple Robin Hood movies or Romeo and Juliet movies or like a super iconic comic book storyline adapted into a superhero movie. But I've now seen 3 separate movies about a guy named Charlie Brewster, his girlfriend Amy, his super annoying and doomed friend Evil Ed, and a vampire named Jerry. Like, you get to Fright Night 2 New Blood and you're like, why am I watching this again? What, like, because even like the Fright Night 2011, it's like you could change the characters' names, you know, like they don't have to keep the names, but there's something.
Fright Night 2 feels like it should have changed the names,
right? So Fright Night,
because it's like they're not even the New Blood.
Yeah. Fright Night 2 could have just been a sequel by virtue of the characters having different names.
It's about the same kind of thing, yeah. But like instead, we've just seen a movie with these characters with the same names. Like, at no point does Charlie go, "Oh, the hot new professor's called Jerry Dandridge. That was my neighbor's name. He was a vampire. I wonder if they're related."
Well, Richard, we're moving into our segments now, and let's open the door on a little mixing metaphors. Dumb IMDb Trivia, which is, of course, one of our favorite segments on this show, where we go look at the user-submitted IMDb trivia for these movies and find stuff that's either didn't need to be said, maybe it's written poorly. So I've got some for each of the films. So for the first film, this is a direct quote, verbatim from IMDb Trivia for Fright Night 1985. It says, "Not many people are aware that there are 2 unofficial remakes done in Bollywood and India. One is called Wohi Bayanak Rat, and the other is called Kalpana House, aka Bungalow number 666. Both were released in the early 90s, and both are lousy." So, early 90s, the letter N, both, the letter R, lousy.
Oh.
In both are lousy.
Oh my god, that's the dumbest IMDb trivia we've ever had.
Yep.
Should we have covered those?
No, they are unofficial remakes. So, I was very close to messaging you very late in the game, being like, there's some Bollywood remakes, but I did a bit of digging in it. They are not like officially sanctioned by the Fright Night team. Another piece of dumb IMDb trivia for Fright Night 1985 is the director trademark for Tom Holland. What do you think his director trademark is?
He played Spider-Man.
No. It's categorized as supernatural disbelief. Character sees something supernatural but can't get anyone else to believe him. See also Child's Play and Cloak and Dagger. It's like, that's not his trademark. That's
just a horror.
And finally, final piece of dumb IMDb trivia for the first film, Charlie is said 62 times during the movie, which is like, it's the main character's name.
Yeah.
For part 2, Fright Night Part 2, dumb IMDb trivia, this is the only piece I've got. Charlie is said 63 times during the movie. So one more time than in
That
the
makes
original.
that retroactively makes the first one not dumb.
Maybe. For the Fright Night remake, this is the only piece of goddamn Imdb trivia for that film. Colin Farrell expressed concern that his character was too much of a sexual predator and suggested script changes. No changes were made. Suck it, Colin Farrell. And I've got a whole bunch for Fright Night 2, The New Blood. Once he was in makeup, Chris Waller, who played Evil Ed, was so into his part that Eduardo Rodriguez had to keep reminding him he wasn't really a vampire. Oh, fuck off, Chris Waller. You sound horrible to be around. Like,
That's such a, just like a funny little anecdote you tell on the press tour.
Yeah.
And then it's been, like, regarded as fact, you know?
But it's like, he dresses up as a vampire and he's like, oh, we had to keep reminding him he wasn't a vampire because this goth actor was so fucking into being a vampire. He's like, yeah, I'm a real vampire. You go on Chris Waller's IMDb page, his profile picture is him in his vampire makeup from this film.
Well, to me, it just sounds like he was like, oh my god, this is so cool. And then, like, on set, you know, he's like, oh, you're not actually a vampire. And they had a little laugh.
Right, yeah.
And then, you know, and they're sitting there and then the two chairs together, like, oh, what was it like, you know, getting covered in that makeup? And he's like, oh, it was so much fun. And the director's like, yeah, I had to keep reminding him he wasn't actually a vampire.
Yeah, maybe that's
and
it.
It's like,
maybe I'm putting too much, maybe I'm thinking Chris Waller is too much of a loser.
Yeah.
Despite being a sequel to Fright Night 2011, there is absolutely no returning cast, even being made 3 years prior to the death of Anton Yelchin, star of the previous film. And I'm just trying to, like, deconstruct what they mean by this. Even though he was still alive, it's still not a sequel. Even though they...
he didn't return, even though he was alive at the time.
And like it's not they knew he was gonna die eventually, but not when the movie was made. Then we have two more pieces of dumb IMDb trivia, which are both about what the last one was about it not being an actual sequel. Despite having a 2 in the title, this is not a sequel but a remake. Sorry, this isn't verbatim. Despite having a 2 in the title, this is not a sequel but a remake, but rather yet another remake of the original Fright Night, whilst taking some elements from the original Fright Night 2. Charlie makes no mention of having previously killed a vampire named Jerry, as he now hunts a vampire named Jerry. Characters need convinced again that vampires are real, having no memory of encountering them previously. Peter Vincent is no longer a paranormal stage magician, but rather a paranormal reality show host, and again has no memory of having previously met Charlie or that vampires are real.
Jesus.
It's like, shut up, I know. And then the last one is, this is a poorly executed, revamped, I put the emphasis there, remake of the original Fright Night films from 1985, Part 1, and 1988, Part 2. It mixes elements of the first original film with elements of its 1988 sequel, such as having a female vampire. And that's about it. Though James Murray, who plays Jerry Dandridge in Fright Night 2 New Blood, gives a great, intoxicating performance as the re-stylized Jerry, the rest of the film and its character development and actors are completely forgettable. Critics referred to it as a foreign version of the American horror classic Fright Night. No, they didn't. I hate whoever wrote this, like, injecting their own opinion into it. Yeah. Gives a great, intoxicating performance. You can't put the word intoxicating in your IMDb trivia.
Yeah.
That is hard opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you're talking about, like, the punch was spiked. Intoxicating is your honesty. That's the only sentence I'll allow.
That's true. All right. So now we're moving on to one of our final segments of the show, which is Continue the Franchise, where we pitch some sequels where we think the franchise could go from here. But before we do that, let's look at some of the other media in the Fright Night universe, either released or unreleased. According to IMDb, in 2015, when asked if he could do a sequel to any of his movies, ignoring existing reboots, for a YouTube fan questions video, writer-director Tom Holland replied that he'd like to do a follow-up to Fright Night, utilising the original cast. His proposed plot was that single father Charlie Brewster inherits his mother's home, and soon after taking up residence, his 2 teenage children become convinced that there's something evil in the house next door, namely Evil Ed, who is squatting in the abandoned mansion, attempting to resurrect Jerry Dandridge. In January 2017, Tom Holland announced that he was writing a Fright Night 3 novel, and that in 2019 he would obtain the rights to the franchise, and that a third movie would be happening. So that's pretty interesting. In terms of other media, Chris Griffiths directed, along with producer Gary Smart, the 2016 documentary film "You're So Cool, Brewster: The Story of Fright Night."
This is the final line of the first film.
Yep. And there are also Fright Night comic books which continue the story, an arcade video game where you play as Jerry, and an off-Broadway stage production, and of course the 2 unofficial Indian remakes, which of course are both lousy. Let's talk about what we would want to do with the series. Richard, do you have any ideas?
Well, part of me just kind of is like, just remake it again. But I would love to see like the Blumhouse, Blumhouse, like reimagining of this. Like put like the Invisible Man, like put some social kind of thing in it. Like Colin Farrell touched on it there, but like you go full on with the like sexual predator nature of Jerry and like fully give me some yummy nummy social commentary on top of Fright Night, because Fright Night is such a great story. I think that it's like a vampire moves next door and you're then like it's Rear Window with a vampire. And yeah, I mean, and like I could quite happily, I mean, obviously the kind of Mad Libs version we got in Fright Night 2 New Blood didn't do it for me, but I would quite happily watch another decent film with this
story structure,
yeah.
Nice. Okay, well, very cool. I thought originally of like making a big song and dance about how we can't get a true sequel to the 2011 one now that Anton Yelchin has passed away, sadly, which is a real bummer. But then I thought I could instead just pitch something way sillier and stupider. And I was like, yep, let's remake it again, but I'm going to cast Charlie Day as Charlie Brewster. I'm going to cast Danny DeVito as Peter Vincent. And I'm going to cast Glenn Howerton as Jerry Dandridge.
Yeah, nice.
So an Always Sunny in Philadelphia Fright Night. It's always fright at night. It's
nice.
my continued franchise.
My other kind of idea that you could, without very many changes, make Fright Night 2011 a secret sequel to the original, because there's a whole bit that David Tennant's Peter Vincent has battled Jerry Dandridge before, and you could add in, it would be kind of convoluted, but that like he's actually the original Charlie Brewster, and he adopted the name Peter Vincent, and it's like Peter Vincent's a code name kind of thing.
Wow.
And adopted this stage personality based on the person who like helped him defeat Jerry Dandridge in 1985. And you would just not name Anton Yelchin's character Charlie Brewster. And
no, man, you got to keep it. It's got to be a time as a flat circle. All Charlie Brewsters inevitably meet and change their name to Peter Vincent, and then meet another Charlie Brewster to fight a vampire named Jerry Dandridge.
Yeah, but like it kind of for a very brief moment, it seemed like that's what was going to happen.
Right. Nice. Well, Richard, we're now at one of the sort of the butt end of the episode where we're going to rank that franchise. So over on letterboxd.com/cultpopture, you can find our lists for all the franchises we've ranked, and we've got Fright Night here. So where are we ranking Fright Night? Is it above? It's above the Nymphomaniac Constant. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%.
Yep. So if we move slowly above, we've got Mighty Ducks, which I think we can safely say is better than. High School Musical, I would say it's better than. I would put it up. I'm going to jump a few. I'm going to go up toward. Do you think it is better than Jaws?
Like, it feels weird to say it's better than Jaws, but
the franchise.
It
Jaws.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's more consistent.
Yep.
It's got one blemish, 3 otherwise very good films.
Is it better than Gremlins?
Yes.
Scary Movie?
Yep.
Final Destination?
Yeah.
Happy Death Day?
I think we're finding our spot.
Number 30. All right. Fright Night is the 30th best franchise we've watched for the podcast. And now to finish off the show, we are going to reveal what our next franchise that we're covering the next fortnight is, which was voted on by our Patreon this week, or this past fortnight, over at patreon.com/cultpopture. And boy, was this the most exciting franchise vote we've ever had on Patreon. People were like campaigning for different franchises. There was like every day I'd check and like someone would have taken a vote off one other film, and like we had like one rise to the top and then one rise to second place and then dropped to like third while another one rose to second place. It was very exciting. Yeah. But before we get into that, Richard, do you want to pull it up and so you've got it in front of you so you can announce it for us? But before we announce it, I do just want to say that if you enjoyed this podcast, then you can find us over on all the social medias, Cult Popture at all the places, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Instagram, I already said that. We've also got our Discord that I mentioned, which there'll be a link to in the show notes. You should definitely join the Discord, the Patreon, as we mentioned, and you can email us at cultpopturemedia@gmail.com. Subscribe everywhere, like everywhere. We would very much appreciate your support, whether it's monetary or just loving. And Richard, tell us, what is our next film franchise fortnight?
All right, our next film franchise fortnight is one of those franchises that feels long overdue for us to cover on this podcast. It's a Disney franchise.
Yay!
But it might not be what comes to mind immediately when you think Disney. It's Pirates of the Caribbean, the 5-film franchise, famous for its diminishing returns. And it's funny, like I as I mentioned, I leave watching Fright Night so late.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to go watch the first Pirates of the Caribbean right now, and then probably leave 2 to 5 very late.
Yeah. I'm very excited. I deeply, deeply love the first film, but I haven't had an excuse to watch it since before we've done this podcast. I haven't watched it
because
in years.
You've seen all 5, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, I've watched 1, 2, and 3, and I believe I've said on the podcast before that until this podcast, the third one was the worst movie I'd ever seen.
Wow. There we go, everybody. So look
tune
forward
in
to that.
2 weeks to see if that opinion holds up.
We will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned
for the post-credit
scene. Yeah, all right. See you later, everybody. Bye.
All right. Go watch Fright Night.
Yeah. Any of them. Even the bad one.
No,
I'll
don't.
fucking watch it, pussies.
Hello, everyone. This is a post-credit scene brought to you by our Patreon. This is a special little scene, just because you're a special little guy. Listen to this. Or girl. Yeah, so this is where for just $5 dues on our Patreon, you can, among other things, suggest a topic for us to discuss. And so quite often it's a question, but today it's not, well, it is a question. They just didn't put a question mark on it. But this is from Craig Major, who asks, can you please do a review of Too Many Cooks?
Yeah, man.
So what is Too Many Cooks?
It's good. Too Many Cooks, from what I understand, is like an Adult Swim short film.
Yeah, it's actually part of a series called, like, that doesn't have and the show is just called Infomercials. And so it's essentially this, it's like the umbrella title for a project of 15-minute American Adult Swim TV specials, and they're mostly played about 4 a.m.
Right.
And they're not in the guide under anything. It's in the middle of like a block of, I guess, infomercials. And so Too Many Cooks was like kind of the big one that took off, but there was also unedited footage of a beer that, like,
yeah, man.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, I watched it for the first time like the other week, actually.
It's great. I love unedited footage of a beer. What is there? Where can I find a list of infomercial episodes?
I could go to look on Too Many Cooks Wikipedia page and then click on
Infomercials.
But yeah, so Too Many Cooks is essentially, it's like a parody of an 80s or 90s TV show theme, where the characters like are in the middle of a situation and then turn to the camera and smile and their name comes up, and then it delves into like, and so then it's like an endless cast. So first off, the joke is that it's like there's just like 100 people in the show, and then it starts becoming this like surreal, there's like a serial killer, and then but I think it's like the background of it that it aired at like 4 a.m. No one knew it was happening, and that's kind of how it rose to prominence. I remember seeing on the front page of Reddit that was like, Adult Swim aired this at 4 a.m. last night with no fanfare. But yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic.
It's very funny. One of my favorite things about it is that a sitcom from the 80s would be called Too Many Cooks because the surname of the main family would be Cook. Which I don't know if it's specified in it, but it's like, that's exactly how TV show concepts were developed. Is they got a saying, made the surname of the character, like Fuller House is a great example recently of this. So I really enjoy that about it, and it's a lot of fun.
It's great to show someone who has no idea what's going on, and it's funny as one of the girls from Caitlin Nakin, because there were all the actors actually like appear with their real names, but it's she then showed up in The Walking Dead, and it was like, what the hell?
So, Craig, who suggested this question or suggested we do this for the post-credit scene, I think he once asked, "What's the most creepy?" I probably got it written in front of me. It was like his other post-credit scene that he'd already asked, because this is his second one, was like, oh yeah, an example of something that your brain just failed to completely recognize or whatever. And I talked about a scene from a art piece YouTube web series called Alan Tutorial. And it's called Alan Tutorial because it was run by Alan Resnick, who is a big player in these infomercials. So he made, he helped with unedited footage of a beer. He wrote it, or one of the writers for it. But he also made This House Has People in It, which Craig showed me years and years ago, which is a great fucking weird fucking short film. Like, Alan Resnick does these like, they're just quirky enough to be considered comedies, but they're like pretty serious all up. And This House Has People in It is like a 10-minute short film that just flicks between different security cameras of a house, like with a family living in it. And the main kind of crux of it is one of their kids is sinking through the floor. And like it's just the various places in the house dealing with that. And the most intriguing thing about it is at one point it cuts to just the son in the lounge watching TV, and as it cuts to it, you see what looks like a Sonic the Hedgehog shaped monster like walk outside the window, and then nothing. It never comes up again. and I looked into it, and it turns out, you know, with a lot of these things, with unedited footage of a beer, and with This House Has People in It, with Alan Tutorial, there's a whole like, you follow a website that you see written down in the video, and it comes, you know, you work out and unravel the mystery for yourself. So pretty cool stuff. Not something I have the patience to fully look into, but I goddamn respect it.